Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, family. I am back. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the mental house. I am your host, Khadijah. Um, Today, well, not particular today, but this month marks the anniversary of Frank Jude beating. A lot of y'all are like, who is, may not be familiar with Frank Jude. A lot of y'all are familiar with Emmett Till, but if you've never seen a beating like the beating that was administered to Emmett Till by those lowlifes, if you look at the picture of Frank Jude after his beating, actually after some of them had healed, he had been in the hospital for a few months. Some of this face, it was just to leave an image in your mind what was done to him by Milwaukee Police Department, and uh, the reason why I took so much interest in the case. Of course, his uncle was my principal in high school, um, and without trying to go too much into the story, I'm gonna read to y'all what happened to Frank Jude. Um, at the behest of running into some off-duty Milwaukee Police Department uh, cops. Frank Jude Jr. suffered a brutal beating on a street in Milwaukee's Bayview neighborhood on October 24th, surrounded by a dozen men. He was kicked repeatedly in the head, stripped naked, threatened with a knife, his attorney said. Bayview is on it's a predominantly white area, and it is located on the south side of Milwaukee. Um, but the Bayview community has been known sometimes to be a little racist. So, just to give you a little backstory about Bayview. Authorities knew right away who was involved, but more than 3 months later, no one had been charged or even arrested. So this is what had happened. The story would have never came out unless the lawyer had to pull the bluff of the Milwaukee um, hierarchy, because they just would not release any information. They would not arrest the officers. They would not even mention what happened, and just like they do right now. And incidentally, this was October of 2004, I believe, when this happened, if I'm not mistaken, um, or five. So, but I believe it happened in October 24th in 2004, and because the police would not release any of the information or charge anybody, the lawyers were forced to go to the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel and report the story. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Anyway, um, the suspects, off-duty Milwaukee police officers who claimed that Jude stole one of their badges. The officers said that they had to subdue Jude because he fought with them. Witnesses tell a different story, and I just want y'all to know that witnesses are white. So this is very important. Frank Jude is a black man. It's actually, he's a black man, and the officers in question were all white. It was in a white neighborhood, but the witnesses were also white. Okay, because there are some white people that just can't. They're just not built for the kind of savagery that a lot of their fellow white counterparts can unleash on people. Some of them ain't about that life. Okay, anyway, witnesses tell a different story. Jude was arrested and taken by police wagon to the hospital. No ambulance was even called. Prosecutors did not file charges against him, instead focusing on the off-duty officer's actions. In connection with the incident, 4 off-duty officers were suspended by Chief Nanette Haggerty, who declined to comment on the pending matter. Okay, now remember, all this activity happened after um, it was released by the newspaper that this had taken place. The investigation has been slowed by some officers who aren't fully cooperating, the district attorney said. Now, this is John Chisholm, who we just voted in again. Um, oh, no, no, I'm sorry, John. That was E. Mike McCann, the same one who prosecuted Jeffrey Dahmer. Another one of the good old Irish boys. Anyways, Nanette Haggerty was the first female police chief Milwaukee had, and those males ran ramshot over her. She used to work horror detail when she was an officer, and they being a police decoy, and somehow they still treated her like a whore when she became police chief because no one seemed to cooperate under her leash, under her watch. That's how I know that the police department is sexist, and not only is it racist, it is sexist as well. It's one of those fraternal orders that white males dominate. And anything that white males dominate, I'm sorry, it's just going to, in my opinion, unless it's just going to be extremely barbaric, because they think they have carte blanche to kill and to rule over everything and everybody, and that's just how they think. Anyway, the investigation had been slowed by some officers who weren't fully cooperating. A secret John Doe investigation also was launched in an effort to get witnesses to talk. Frank Jude has been interviewed extensively, but he can't identify his attackers, said Deputy District Attorney John Redden, the lead prosecutor. He is very little help in telling us what happened, because he was beaten within an inch of his life. Okay, so that is the main reason why he can't identify. And my computer is acting really crazy right about now. He was beaten within an inch of his life, which is the first and foremost reason why they can't get any information out of this man. Okay, so we're gonna put the whole thing in context as soon as the computer allows me to go back to the article. It's acting real crazy. The investigation again has been slowed because no one wants to help. So we get down to here. Then it goes, prosecutors must also overcome the fact that Jude would be a likely target of credibility attacks by defense attorneys. He has a felony conviction for selling marijuana and bribing a police officer in 1996. He was later convicted of misdemeanor disorderly conduct and battery, the second charge, in 2000. He served a year in prison for the bribery charge, according to online database and court records. Many officers won't tell all they know. Oh boy, this computer is going crazy. It's just, man. Many officers won't tell what they know about the beating. Let's see. I'm sorry, you guys. Let me just get here. Let's see. He's very little help to us. Okay, blah 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 blah. Many officers won't tell what they know because they committed crimes. Others because of misplaced loyalty to colleagues, said District Attorney E. Michael McCann, who also called Jude's case horrendous and compared it to the 1981 beating of James Chamberlain, whose skull was fractured by Milwaukee Police Department after a car chase. There's no question crimes were committed, McCann said. This is not the usual type of case. Instead of police cooperating with you, you have a number of police who are intent on obstructing the jury. McCann emphasized that some of the officers have cooperated. Everyone has a right to remain silent. His office is not naming suspects and that his comments should not necessarily be taken to apply to the 4 suspended officers. More than 100 days after the assault, Jude struggles in its aftermath, both physically and mentally. If I committed this crime, I would be in jail, he said. They should not be on the street. I am scared. I don't need that, and my kids don't need that. All I want is for justice. Jude started the night of October 23rd performing at a bachelorette party. Jude was a stripper, by the way, y'all. Jude, who worked at a medical supply company loading trucks, moonlighted as a stripper. Lavelle Harris, 32, carried equipment for Jude that night. Afterward, the men went to a bar with some of the partygoers, including Kristen Antonison and Katie Brown. Another woman invited Tonison, Brown, and the men to a party in Bayview. I don't know what they was thinking because I wouldn't have went. Near S. Ellen Street and Russ Avenue at a house owned by Andrew Springler, one of the suspended officers. The woman went first and made sure it was okay for Springler that all 4 came to his party. Brown and Antonis said that in the interview. The party at Springler's house had been going on for hours and involved heavily drinking. When Brown and Antonison and the men walked together in the house, many of the 25 to 30 guests, who were all white, stared, Brown said. It was a very uncomfortable situation, said Brown, 22, a college student. The women said they immediately went to the bathroom, leaving Jude and Harris, who were both black, for a brief time. When they came out, Jude asked if the people there were racist based on something he heard. Antonison said she did not know what was said. Jude declined to discuss what happened on October 24th because his attorney, Jonathan Safran, said it may jeopardize the investigation. Antonison suggested that they all leave if Jude and his friend were uncomfortable. So they walked out. The women got into Antonison's Ford 150 pickup. Jude and Harris stood outside the vehicle, deciding where they were going to go. Okay, Safran and Harris's attorney, Michael Bishop, said neither man stole anything from the house. They never moved from the spot they stood in. Springler, a 6-year veteran of the force, gave a different account, according to police reports. Spangler said that he caught Jude coming out of his bedroom, and then he noticed that his wallet, which held his badge, was missing. Springer confronted Jude and Harris, but neither man answered, and they left, the report said. At this time, Spangler notified other off-duty officers of this and followed Harris and Jude to their vehicle, stating to them that the property was missing, and identified themselves as Milwaukee police officers, and ordered Harris and Jude to stand still until they was able to confirm this. Now, all this was a lie. It was later confirmed. Okay? But I want you to hear the diabolical nature of these people. They were off duty because the whole police department, the mindset is, the culture is disturbing. It's the slave catcher mentality. Blood shooting. Okay, people gathered on the porch. The women urged Jude and Harris to get in the truck, which was quickly surrounded by 10 to 15 people from the party. And said Anderson, also a college student. They all identified themselves as officers but didn't show any identification. Screaming that a badge and a gun had been stolen and demanding that they get out. Antonison and Brown said there was no mention of a stolen gun in the police reports, though, by the way. Antonison said that she suggested that they call 911 so she could be sure they were really police. But the men continued screaming at her friends. Then one man broke out a headlight on Tonison's truck, which prompted Brown to exit the truck. Tonison followed. The women aren't clear on what happened to Harris, but both remembered that Jude was pulled out of the truck by his legs. One man took Antonison's keys, the other took Jude's keys. Authorities later found his Saturn vandalized, seats cut out, inside mirrors broken, antifreeze poured in the back seat, and the stereo equipment broken. This was the car that Frank Jude and went over in. And by the way, the guy Harris, he ran. He hauled ass. He knew what was coming. He knew that they were about to get the shit beat out of him, and he didn't want to stand there not one more second for any more of this violence, because he knew what was going to happen. All right. A woman who had said an officer searched Brown and Antonison and their purses, they said. Meanwhile, Jude were confronted by several men. One cut Harris's face with a knife. Oh, I forgot, he hadn't ran yet. One cut Harris's face with a knife and told him to turn around to be assaulted with the knife, the attorney said. Harris, who did not return a call for comment, broke free and ran. He was arrested later and booked into the jail on suspicion of theft, which has not been pursued by the prosecutors. I wonder why. They had a drunken white mob party, just like I read to you out of the book that I hope that you guys would support, A Black Holocaust in America. It's the same behavior. Springler held Jude in a headlock while against the car while the men shouted questions and punched him. Antonison, who estimated she was 15 feet away when Jude went to the ground on his stomach with roughly 12 men around him, kicking and punching him in the head, and his arms were held behind his back. I couldn't watch very much of it. The men were kicking him. You could see blood just shooting out. I have never seen anything like it. It was so disgusting. I hate even thinking about it, Antonison said, tears forming in her eyes. The police report indicates that Jude fought the off-duty police officers, right? 15 men or more. They had his arms behind his back the whole time, Brown said. There was nothing that he could do. Antonison said that is not true. He did not resist at all. McCann said the officers can use reasonable force to subdue someone, but added, I don't think anyone could contend that is what happened here. What happened here was reasonable. Tonison called her mother and then 911 on her cell phone. On the recorded calls, her voice ranges from indignation to hysteria. The off-duty police officers warned each other that police were on the way. The first squad car with the officers Joseph Shabel and Nicole Martinez arrived at 3 a.m. and Sergeant Stan Court arrived a minute later, police records show. At the same time, Antonison is talking to an emergency operator. On the tape, Antonison said the responding officers beat Jude too. So as she called the police officers, when the police officers came, they got out the car and started beating him as well. Anderson says she doesn't recall that, but what was said, it was so chaotic. The situation is trusted, and this is and trusted what she told the 911 operator. Shabelle, Martinez, and Court did not return calls seeking comment for this story. Wow, it's just insane. McCann declined to say whether the on-duty police officers, who we noted were less experienced than the off-duty officers, were being investigated. So, since they were less qualified, but they came and participated in the bludgeoning, they are not prosecuted as well. I think that's horrible. By the way, these police officers were part of the gang called the Punishers. that worked out of the 7th district. They were totally gang members. He's stealing the phone from me, Antonison said. They're twisting my arm, the man says. Hang up the phone. Hang up the phone. Hello, the operator says. The line goes dead. Oh, my God. At least 10 squad cars responded along with internal investigators as an officer took away Jude, who was naked from the waist down. He looked like a bomb had exploded in his face. Now, the reason why they took his pants off, because they took knives and stuff and stuck it up his rectum. They took an ink pen and jugged it through his ears. Then it came all the way through. I mean, it was so it was so unbelievable that here we are 15 years later hearing the same pattern of excuses, the same line of investigation, the same, like, verbatim. It's a fucking script. It's a script. I can't even read anymore because it's so disgusting. His clothes were literally cut off of him by the officers. If he had a badge, they would have found it. Frank Jude was taken to the hospital where he would spend 2.5 days recovering. He suffered a concussion, a broken nose, fractured sinus cavity, cuts in both ears, cuts swelling to his left eye socket, neck, head, face, legs, back, with severely sprained left hand. His eyes were swollen shut and continued to bleed for 10 days. He will need surgery to breathe through his nose again. He will have a permanent disability in one hand. Frank is a big guy. He's 6 feet tall and he weighs 230 pounds. And he's very physically fit. So that was the first thing that the race Ku Klux Klan soldiers were pretty upset about, was the fact that the guy was nicely built and these white women liked him. So they brought him to a party. Not the woman that allowed them to bring them, she should have been questioned. I'm not so much since Antoinette and her friend didn't know the people, the house they went to, they were following this particular girl. She's the one is in question. When Frank Jude was in the hospital, it affected his 4-year-old boy and his baby girl. When he came home from the hospital, his son thought that he was dressed early for Halloween. He said, "Take off your mask, Daddy. Take off your mask." That's how bad Frank Jude was beaten. I don't want to read any more of this because, it brings back too many disgusting memories, because I'm not done saying what they did to him. But thank God Frank Jude survived. He's had a lot of problems since then. Yes, he has. And of course, they wanted to make him serve time for something else he did that he was on probation for, since he decided to sue the city for that beating. So he was tortured again when he went to jail. But if you don't know the story about Frank Jude and it came on court TV and you didn't get a chance to catch it, because if you think that story is bad, the following story of what happened to each and every one of those officers who didn't get found guilty until we called the federal government in. They didn't even get found guilty of all this beating by an all-white jury. It was insane. And if any of y'all can follow that or bring that up and read that, 2005, I was a party of that. I remember that. I mean, I was a real advocate for trying to bring these officers to justice that beat him. Okay, that was one of the components or strong points that the aldermen would not let up on until there was federal charges brought. And we all marched, and we all at that time did the same thing they're doing today. Okay, it's never going to change it because it's a system that says it's okay to do this to us. And until y'all get that through y'all heads, it's happening right now somewhere. Find out what you can about Frank Jude. You'd be shocked that he survived the ordeal in Bayview on that Milwaukee night. Alright, I'm gonna go. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time in the mental house. Bye bye.